So, again, don't know who everybody is. Could be nobody. Could be just me, or two people, or whatever. But still. So, last time we did creating a character. This time we are going to do the playing the game. The nitty gritty. So. So this first part is all about exploration. How do you find things in the world? How do you interact with the world around you? And cool thing from the games, there's a fast travel system. Now in this, because this is written, for the fantasy elements, they take out one of the T's, and it's fast travel. So it sounds more mystical and magical, as Gray writes in her book. So you can fast travel to wherever you found other fast travel points. And I just thought that was kind of neat because, there's a lot of games where it's, tabletop games where it's, it takes X amount of days to travel this far, travel back to this area, this town you were in, this kingdom, what have you. So that's a neat thing. But the next thing is echomancy, which it allows the Pandorans to communicate over long distances. Obviously through, like in the game, in the Borderlands games, it's, technology. It's an echo system that allows you to communicate through, like, an earpiece and walkie-talkies, phones, that kind of thing. But then in this, it's, it's echo stones because it's the fantasy world of Wonderlands and Pandora. Pandora. So, anyway. After that, then we have our checks that we get into here. The basic concept, if you've never played before, is the checks are how you interact with the world. The BM sets a difficulty level for doing something, such as, there's a gap, there's a chasm in the earth and I need to jump across. Well, depending on how far, and, if you have a good foothold, if you can have enough distance to run and build up some speed, it changes the difficulty, and the BM will set that difficulty, and you have to roll to resolve that check. So, and of course, when you do these checks, you add any bonuses from your stats, any mod bonuses, to those checks. And if it falls into something that maybe you have a trait or background buff for, then you add that as well. It kind of gives a little rundown of interact checks and all that, like the different, not just interact checks, but interact, talk, search, traverse, insight, and sneak. And kind of gives examples of when to use them and when not to. Interact checks, when to use interact checks. When picking up a mythical weapon and trying to avoid the trap mechanism. When frantically trying to disable the trap mechanism that you just activated. Or when the Vault Hunter is hungover and has to do literally anything. When not to use an interact check. When a Vault Hunter is using an item they've used dozens of times before, except when hungover, of course. Or when picking up items outside of combat or during or time-sensitive moments. So don't use the interact checks during that. Like, if it's not something difficult, and it's not in a time that's like kind of crunch time, then, don't worry about the interact checks. Of course, this is all up to your specific bunker master. And then talk checks, when you want to negotiate or intimidate, when you want to persuade or bluff, or when you want to perform slam poetry. Then there's also, when not to use talk is when you're having a normal conversation, or, they're elaborating on your backstory. When they're yelling something during an encounter, like if you're yelling to a teammate, you don't need to do a talk check. And, also if your character takes a vow of silence, because you're silent. Insight. When a Vault Hunter is recalling information that you may not remember correctly. When you are solving the riddle of the Sphinx, or similar quizzical creatures. Or when you're trying to read into the intentions of a person or creature that you see. When not to use them, when you're using knowledge that you talk about often, when you are remembering an important piece of the campaign, like when the Vault Hunter is remembering an important piece of the campaign, and when a Vault Hunter is trying to read the intentions of a creature that is currently eating them alive. Don't use an insight check. Just try to survive. Don't do the insight. Because soon enough you're going to be doing an inside check instead of an insight check. Anyway, when to use the sneak. When a Vault Hunter wishes to not be seen, or when they wish to not be heard. When to not use sneak. When you wish to be seen, or wish to be heard. And that's all there is for that one. Search, when you're trying to find something hidden, like a secret pathway or item. When you believe there's more loot to find, if you look hard enough. Or if there are tracks the Vault Hunter wants to follow. When not to use search checks. When something is out in the open, like a door or item just sitting there. When the Vault Hunter is trying to loot a non-dead enemy. Because that would be sneak. Because then that's just stealing from somebody. Anyway, traverse. When a Vault Hunter wants to hop over a barrier, a box, or onto a platform, that's when you use it. Or when they are trying to attempt a challenging climb, swim, or leap. When not to use traverse checks, if there's something easily avoidable for the Vault Hunter, like if it would make sense for them to just be able to quickly overcome that thing, then don't worry about the check. Or if you're just taking a regular move action, don't need to worry about the check. Now here's where we get into the thick of it. So during an encounter, you have a set amount of actions. So this is the combat section. You can move. You can attack, which is, your ranged or melee. If you don't want to attack, you can use your action skill, and that replaces your full attack and everything. You can toss a grenade, and this says, interestingly enough, at any time during your turn, you can launch a grenade. So, I mean, honestly, it kind of sounds like that's a separate action from the attacks, from the action skill, which is kind of nice. Now, for combat, for actions, or let me not get ahead of myself. Then you can throw items to your teammate. You can drink a potion. You can swap a gun. You can perform a check. You can reload, or you can hold your action. So that way it'll trigger when a certain thing happens. If I want to wait till the enemy gets close enough to that cliff, and then I want to charge him and push him off the cliff. That's holding your action. Or, I want to wait until they're standing right next to that barrel of acid, and then I want to shoot the barrel so that it blows up. Easy peasy. But with this, with the attacks and everything, this is what I mentioned in my last video. I was going to kind of get into the combat system at some point. And with this, the combat's very different than if you're a long-time D&D fan. I mean, it's still D20s, D10s, D12s, D8s, D6s, D4s, all that. Still got your percentage dice, all that fun stuff. But in order to really outright fail at a roll, at least for attacking, for combat, you have to roll or just, get a 1, whether it's a natural 1, which is never a good thing, or having, modifiers that bring your roll down to a 1. Because with a lot of these, guns actually have pretty specific hit chances. Like this says right here, the crappy rifle that you start the game with, if you want the rifle and not one of the other crappy guns, rolling a 2 to 7 lands you a hit. But as you go up from there, like an 8 to 15 lands you 3 hits. And then a 16 plus lands you 3 hits and a crit hit. So that's kind of neat. I thought that was a cool way to do it and really simulate the Borderlands experience, because unless you're really bad at that video game in particular, you're probably not going to just outright miss a shot. You might, do the recoil of your gun. You might end up kind of off to the side. But you're not really just going to outright miss. And so I thought that was a cool way to translate that into this. And the same thing goes, that's where your speed as a player comes in, your character. Not as a player. I don't want you running around my table. That'd be weird. But your speed as a character comes into it because whenever the enemy rolls to hit you, as the bunker master, I'm rolling the same way that you are for enemy attacks and for your attacks and all that. But your speed modifier gets subtracted from my rolls. So, if you're just the fastest person there and you've got a 10 in speed, then I'm getting -5 to each of my rolls. So when I might normally hit, I could have a great hit and maybe thinking, oh cool, I'm going to shoot this person 3 times. Not so much. I'm probably only going to hit you once then. So that speed is pretty important. But, and on top of that, there's the badass system too, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But that adds a whole different aspect to your rolls and everything. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, so that damage aspect, that rolling for damage, is, like I said, you have to roll pretty horrendously to outright fail. Even melee attacks. A 1 is to fail. Between 2 and 15 is normal damage, just regular melee damage. And if you roll 16 and 19, you add an extra damage dice. So if your melee is 1d12, if you're a psycho, you're adding another d12 onto that if you roll above a 16. Unless you roll a natural 20, then you just double the damage outright. So, it's pretty nice. So, and you'll add a crit to your damage roll if it's the natural 20. So, yeah, it's a lot of damage being done, a lot of chances to hit. Like I said, you're less likely to just miss outright, which is cool and very, very similar to, I feel like, the essence of the Borderlands games. Now, when you do some of the other actions, like throwing an offhand item, it's kind of cool. It has just like a set, like if you are throwing something, um, not throwing an offhand item, throwing or handing off an item. The dyslexia is getting the better of me today. But if you're throwing an item to someone, it like all these things I'll explain later too. There's repercussions for your actions depending on the actions you take during your round, but you still have a lot of options. So if you're throwing an item, as long as the distance in squares to your target is equal to or less than your damage mod, you don't need to roll. It's an automatic success. If your damage mod is a +4 and your buddy is 4 spaces away and you're trying to throw a health potion to them, boom, automatic success. Pretty cool. Now, if you are going to, if it's further than that, if you want to throw, 5, 6, 7, obviously, it says right here that the player must pass an accuracy roll of 12 or higher by rolling a d20 and adding their accuracy mod. If you pass, it succeeds. If you fail, it doesn't. Easy peasy. And to hand off an item, you have to be adjacent to that person just by 1 square. You have to be like right next to them. But that, like throwing, if you succeed, there's a system that's like I mentioned before. It's the inverse of the badass tokens. It's the Mayhem system. And a lot of these actions that you do in your turn can generate Mayhem. Like if you want to take an extra attack, totally fine. That gives the Bunker Master a Mayhem point to screw with you later. If you want to hand off an item, that gives the Bunker Master a point of Mayhem to screw with you later. Throwing an item is fine, which I think that's interesting, but handing it off, there's no real risk in it anyway. So the risk is now that your Bunker Master gets some Mayhem points to play around with. And if you're anything like me, and you're the Bunker Master, you're going to play around with those, and you're going to just have fun messing with your players. Just because they're making the choice. They're choosing to, what's the risk versus reward factor. If they do a little more now, is it worth the risk of what could happen later? And if they all say yeah, or if that one player makes the executive decision and says yeah, then they got to deal with it. So yeah, if you take that extra attack, if you take an extra movement, that generates a Mayhem point. So unless your action skill allows you to move further, I believe for sure the Psychos gives extra movement speed. At some point, whether it's in the vanilla or the ultimate skill unlock, that does at some point they get extra movement speed. So that happens. But yeah, for that extra attack, extra attacks generate 1 Mayhem point. Again, unless your skill allows an extra attack, or something about your character allows an extra attack. So let's see. Drinking potions. That's like I said, that's something that you can do through there. You can hold 3 potions in your inventory, which is nice. You can swap guns, but swapping guns, Mayhem point. So again, be careful if you want to swap, because you get 3 active guns as as you can that you can swap between during encounters. So those ones just like the games, you can swap between weapons. But with this, it increases the Mayhem points given to your Bunker Master if you swap during a fight. Now you have a whole inventory full of other guns and everything too that you can't swap to during an encounter, but obviously all these guns you can mess around with outside of encounters, outside of combat. Reloading, you really don't ever need to reload, which is cool. You don't need to worry about ammo, unless you roll a 1. If you roll a 1 on your attack roll for shooting, you have to spend your action to reload because you pretty much just jammed your gun. Now there are certain, based on the skills that you have, there are certain effects, or if you, based on relics or whatever that you have, there are certain effects that will occur upon reloading a weapon. So you might want to reload a weapon at some point. It's just, again, risk versus reward. Is it worth that extra effect to reload your gun in the middle of a fight and give a mayhem point? So, and like I said, you can do the holding action thing. Now we get to a super duper fun part of this, the badass system. And this, like I said, I love they implemented a way to use like rule of cool, rule of fun, and make it really work for the players. And honestly, take a lot off the Bunker Master's plate for finding a way to make it work in the game. Because, you might want your player to feel like they're really in control of this and do something extraordinary. I mean, that's what the point of these games are for, right? That's what you do. You're creating this character to live vicariously through it in this fantasy, or in this case, fantasy slash wasteland crazy world. And you want to be able to do things that you'd never be able to do in a million years in the real world. And the badass system is perfect for that. So with this system, I'll just kind of read outright a little bit. So the player begins a badass move by describing in detail what they want to do on their turn, including all the actions required to make the badass move happen. Your movements, your attacks, your checks, everything. And be super descriptive. I mean, be as descriptive as possible. If the Vault Hunter has any catchphrases or one-liners, they should absolutely feel free to pepper those in. Now, this is your moment, in this team-up movie that is this game. This is your moment to shine. This is your moment to have a sequence just dedicated to your character. And the BM is the final determination on whether the turn described is badass enough to qualify as a badass move. If the Bunker Master deems that it's worthy enough to be considered a badass move, then they'll put a difficulty level on it to roll against. Badass die is, I actually do have it right here. I haven't even opened it yet because I'm just too excited to dive right into the book. Now, it's this beautiful thing. This giant D20 that has 3 critical successes and 3 critical fails. It's not, they're not really critical, but still, 3 ways to fail, 3 ways to succeed. And yeah, that's the big boy dice that Tina has in there. So yeah, that's pretty nice. But so what that does, if it's essentially if it's a 1, 2, or 3, which on that it's actually bombs, it's a 1. If it's 18, 19, or 20, which is the vault symbol, it's a 20. So technically, I guess, yeah, it would be a crit in that scenario. It's a crit fail, crit succeed. So the next thing though is you can actually turn this into a team action if you want to, and other players can assist. So I'll read that as well. Any party member can assist a player in their badass move by sacrificing their turn and joining the shenanigans. And yes, it does say shenanigans, which is just amazing. Based on the declared badass move of the first player, the assisting player describes what additional moves they are adding into the mix to help their teammate. Like, if one of your teammates wants to run and, like, let's say there's something flying in the air and they want to try to, like, use different things to jump off there. Maybe your other teammate's gonna, like, grab as many things as possible, as ridiculous as it sounds, and throw them into the air so that your super fast teammate can jump off of them and get up higher. Just however you feel that you are going to be able to, in a very badass manner, assist this already very badass maneuver. So, I think that's kind of neat. You can turn this into, like, essentially, if you've seen the games, the opening sequence always has, like, a little team moment where they're all working together to do something super cool to the enemies, that they're all under attack and they're, back-to-back shooting. This is that. This is when you can do that moment. And I thought that was pretty cool. So, moving forward, the player rolls a badass die and adds their badass rank to the roll. So that's where that badass rank that we talked about in the other video comes in. That levels up like your XP does at a rate chosen by the Bunker Master. And all assisting players, if there were any, will roll the badass die as well, adding their badass rank to the rolls. All rolls are then added together to get the final result and checked against the difficulty. So, it could be that you just overkilled this badass move. It could have been a difficulty of only, like, let's say 15, and all of a sudden everyone got together and they rolled like a 38. As a Bunker Master, me, I'd probably, if they literally doubled what they were supposed to get, I'd probably do something real cool with it. Really give them some extra bonuses and everything. But here's this. If the player succeeds at rolling equal to or higher than the badass difficulty, the scene unfolds exactly as they envisioned. Anytime during that same turn that a player consults their stats, so anytime, you have to do anything, whether it's, and this goes back to what I was saying with the speed and everything, you'll use the big stat. So, if you normally use the mod, the stat mod, like your strength's 8, you get a plus 4 to, it's not your strength per se, it's, your damage mod or whatever. But, if your damage is 8, you get a damage mod of 4. Well, after doing this badass move, you get to use that whole 8 instead of the 4. If your speed is 10, you normally get a plus 5, you get to use that whole 10. So you're going to, any roll that the Bunker Master makes against you to see if they hit you, all of a sudden they're taking 10 away from that instead. That's, I'd say crazy, but this whole game is pretty crazy and amazing. So, that's just really cool. Yeah, like this, it even says, if the enemy is still alive and retaliates, the player will get to dodge the attack using their larger speed stat. So, like, anything that's, needing, that you need to check the stats for after, that's what it is. Or even if, you do this badass move, it doesn't really give a clear idea of, do you still get an extra attack? If you wanted to get an extra attack and give your Bunker Master a Mayhem point, I'd probably allow it. Because, you just did something super badass. Have fun. Then you do that attack with your full damage mod, your full accuracy, whatever, your full damage stat, your full accuracy stat. So, I thought that was pretty neat. Now you earn tokens, and that's how often you can do this. So, like, if you do the successful roll, you get 4 badass tokens. If you fail, you get 2 badass tokens. as someone who's assisting in this, if it's a success, you get 2. If you fail, it's 1. And also on a failure, Mayhem point goes to the Bunker Master again. So I mean, these badass tokens. It says, by attempting or executing badass moves, players earn badass tokens. They can also be earned through class archetype features. They can be used in a couple of ways. They can be spent by any player in a party to add +1 to any roll, which is kind of neat, including non-combat checks. They can also be spent to do an additional badass move in an encounter. Because you get 1 badass move per Pandora day. But you can spend tokens to do additional badass moves. Each extra badass move costs 1 additional token cumulatively. 1 extra move costs 1 token. The next costs 2 tokens, then 3 tokens, etc. So, if you do it and you rack up some tokens and you want to do another badass move later on, there you go. Increasing the badass rank. The badass rank goes up for everyone at the same speed, just like with experience, it's all shared. Taking damage, I already kind of covered that. With what you have to worry about as far as when an enemy attacks you, it's against your speed. But you do have shields, which take damage first, and then once those are depleted, health is impacted. Now, shields, if you don't take any further shield damage, or if you don't take any damage at all for 1 round, your shields are starting to actually go up, which is pretty sweet. Now, I mean, I think the first shield that you get in the game is crappy. It's just like everything else, crappy shield. Doesn't naturally regenerate, which is a bit of a bummer. But still, to have something in a game like this, in a tabletop game, that during a fight can start to recover without having to use some sort of special ability or technique, I think that's pretty awesome. Now, health doesn't regenerate during a fight, but it does regenerate in times of peace, essentially. So, and then if you run out of health, you die. But, just like in the games, death is not final. There's what they call Brew You, but since I'm running a game that's actually set in the Borderlands universe itself, that's my homebrewed game, it's still a New You. That's what I'm going with, is the game's name for it, a New You. But there's a catch, because with this, it doesn't take away your money like in the games. You get... Oh wait, sorry, it does take away the money. I was wrong. I forgot. Because there's other things that I find to be more appealing about this. But it does take 10% of your total gold whenever you respawn. But there's also temporary traumas. Like you walk with a limp, so your movement speed is hindered for 1 day because it's essentially something goes wrong with the New You machine. So you walk with a limp for a day, or one of my favorites, you talk with a squeaky, ridiculous voice for a day, and every time you forget, you take 1d6 of damage. But then there's also, if it's really a gruesome death, if you take, for me, I would set it as oh man, my player just took double the required amount of damage to die. They had 20 health points left, they just took 40. They might have a permanent trauma, or if they have died 3 times, then maybe they come back with a permanent trauma, which they can have bonuses or minuses based on that. Maybe you have a horrific scar, but it causes an increase by 1 to your intimidation checks. but it also makes you more recognizable. Like you can't, you're noticed immediately when you walk into town or something. Or even on the flip side, yeah, you might be able to intimidate, but you can't quite smooth talk or charm your way through a situation anymore. Or depending on what NPC you're talking to, could be the flip. If they really dig scars, then maybe you've gotten in. Because there's some scars that look pretty good on people. You never know, especially in this kind of world. You never know. So, I mean, there's some pretty cool different aspects. And of course, there's Tina ones, which, like, oh, your dad's disappointed in you. Stuff like that. It's funny. Or yeah, one of the ones is that your player, or your character, sorry, is vengeful against what they consider God, which is the player of the character. And so then your bunker master has to find a way to insert the player into the game in a way and have your character hunt them down if they ever hear about it. So I mean, just ridiculous stuff. So those are the traumas. Then that brings us to loot and XP, which this is just like one little section here because there's definitely a bigger, more in-depth section on this. But what do you get from killing an enemy? You get gold, you get guns, which is, of course, it says the reason you're here. You get shields, you get grenades, potions, relics, all that cool stuff. How much is available, what you get, the rarity, all that kind of stuff is just like in the game, dependent on the difficulty of enemy and the difficulty of the encounter itself. So that we will do, we will get into a little bit later, because I'm going to do a whole thing with like guns and all that with the loot, because that's a whole different system. Like there's like 8 tables you gotta roll on to generate a random gun. It's super cool. I love it, but it's something that I'm gonna do, and I would probably recommend to any bunker masters to do before your games. Don't make your players sit there through roll. That's just not gonna be fun for anybody. Then the last page of this section, all about leveling up. There's 10 segments in your XP bar. How much XP required for one segment changes as you level up. First, from going to level 1 to 2, I believe it's just 100. And once you level up, your possible rewards is based on your archetype choice. Like what you actually get, how many skill points. Do you have an increase of health? Are you getting an archetype feat? Or is there just a straight up increase to a stat? Do you get actual stat points? Do you get a new favored gun choice? Does your max amount of potions carried or max amount of grenades carried increase? And sometimes it even adds crit damage, which is pretty cool. And it says here, if an archetype level adds crit damage, the player should make a note on the bonus damage in the skills and feats section on their character sheet and any equipped gun cards. Any crit performed will gain the added bonus damage. So, I mean, your crit's already doubling the damage of that shot, that normal shot anyway. All of a sudden, now instead, you're going to get to add maybe +1, +2, +3 to that. So, you're dealing a lot of damage. And then at level 5, you can pick a second archetype. Again, we will, if there's anyone who wants any clarification, if anyone's actually watching these, or if these are just a record for me, that's great too. But maybe, I'll delve into the archetype stuff there. But yeah, that is playing the game. There's a lot to it, but at the same time, it's pretty simple, and I feel like this is more rewarding for players than some other tabletop games because you're constantly going to be helping out. You're constantly dealing damage. You're constantly regenerating shields. You can throw grenades. You can help out teammates. If you're too far to actually do damage to an enemy, you can throw something to a teammate so that they maybe can do that damage instead. you know, it's just pretty cool the way it's laid out, and I'm super pumped to get into it. I'm super pumped to, you know, be the bunker master for these games with my friends, and hopefully share all these games with you guys, whoever you guys may be. But yeah, so that is it, and next time it will be running the game. So a little stuff on setting up encounters and being a bunker master. So once again, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. And go blow shit up.